It's Wednesday, July 10th, 2024, and I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order at 7 o'clock. In the room, we have from the Finance Committee, Jean Goddess, Mike Pratt, Peter Twining, Andy Oldman, Ian Clayton. We also have in attendance Ann Harrison from the Select Board, Chuck Dam, Director of DPW, and Chris School Town Administrator. For that, we go to the year-end budget stuff we have to do first. Before we get in trouble when we do it. So the first item on the agenda is to approve the FY24 FinCom reserve transfers. And does everyone have the spreadsheet that Andrea sent out? It looks like we have 9 transfers, which use up our entire 190,000 budget. So the first one is police department overtime of 18,700. The second is fire salaries overtime of 43,780. And that's in addition to overtime that was approved at town meeting. And that was 100,000 at town meeting.
I'm not remembering exactly.
Okay. And then DPW salaries. COLA adjustment that's coming out of salary reserve, but 11,700 is for overtime. The summer returns.
So we started tracking that last summer because there's just a lot of burials that are all coming on overtime on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yes, you can
So,
control those, can you?
yeah, so it's just kind of out of the norm, so we started tracking it and now it's nothing.
Okay. The next is selectmen expenses. Town reports. HR professional services and overage on newsletters and notices. And then the next item is tax lien expenses. And finally, electricity, no, not from electricity and higher rates, less credits, and then we go down to harbor float repairs and safe boat fuel consumption, then water expenses, equipment and materials, and then chemicals, waste at the water treatment plant and electricity. For a whopping 75 grand. So the people have questions, discussions on these various items.
I got a question about the fire salary.
Yeah.
Well, let's just round it, 44,000, right, for OT?
Yeah.
But that's above and beyond, right? Like, in other words, if I'm remembering correctly, there's like a regular salary budget line, then there's even a budget for OT.
Yes.
Out of the gate, and then this is on top of that.
And I think we had 30,000 in the OT budget originally, because we backed it way down because we were not happy with the prior fire chief. And then I believe we approved 100 grand at time.
100 grand.
Let me look it up because it should be in that quarterly report we just received. For the year end.
Sarah, this is Andrea.
Hi.
We approved the 100. Hi. We approved the 100,000 for the legal professional services, not for fire OT.
So
I think what you might be thinking of.
We didn't add to the fund.
Okay, so the total fire, the OT would have been the 30 and the 44?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
So the total overage or the total?
total OT,
She is around 74.
4.
74%.
Yeah.
Right, so there's some initial salary budget amount, which I don't actually care about, that's like a big number, right?
Yeah.
That's
Actually,
like,
we were low this year, the budget is 30.
no, I mean like legit normal salary, like
Yeah.
that's probably a number like 600 grand.
Oh, yeah.
Some, right, so that number I don't care, because obviously we budgeted to get that, right?
Yeah.
So then we budgeted 30 grand of OT.
Right.
We hit that, and then we went 44 grand above
Right.
the third.
Correct.
For a total of 70.
Yeah.
Right. So how does that 75 compare to past? Yes. 1, 2, 3.
It's significant down.
It was like 200 grand or something in
We
past
did
years.
150 plus. previous years.
And, I think he had overtime early, right?
Yes,
Which was due to needing to staff up.
but they're waiting for people to get fully trained.
Okay.
The last year at this time, we had people in the academy, the
Okay.
fire academy. And so we incurred some additional overtime because of it.
Would Andrew have those numbers? Like the prior 1, 2, 3 years?
But yes.
And,
I don't know if it has a definitive-
That's what I'm.
Andrea, do you have information on prior year, fire overtime?
I do, I'll just have to pull it up, it'll take me a minute.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
because like you said, it's just.
I think the chief's report, you might have had the graph showing.
Yes,
overtime
and it was
compared to
lower.
last 3-year average.
He's been very good about paying attention to overtime, I feel this year,
Yes.
more so than perhaps the last 5 or 10 years.
Obviously, the 44 jumps out and you think it's a bad thing, but when you put it in the right context, it's actually fine, and it's a good thing relative to prior years, it sounds like.
We're doing that.
Yeah, I think we purposely budgeted very low.
Well, and part of that,
Because
we added, I don't know, 4, 5, we're down over the past.
But then the
Over
prior fire chief brought on paramedics that then had to go to the fire academy. So they couldn't work shifts. I recall they couldn't work shifts at the beginning because they couldn't do fires, something like that. It didn't count.
Was the SUV working to save overtime a little? What was it? Foreshadowing the ambulance in case there was another call or something? Weren't they doing something or the paramedic calls?
It was really, the overtime was really driven by who's able to do both duties, both fire and EMT. Right, so there's a lag in getting people fully trained. During that lag period, that's when you incur additional overtime because you're backfilling the staff who've already worked there.
Right.
fully trained.
Are we now at a place where that we've gone past all that?
Correct. So we're fully staffed, everyone's fully trained. So he's actually for the first time in a long time, in a very good position. In terms of being fully staffed, fully trained. That hasn't happened in years, actually. It's very.
But I still think for next year's budget, we should probably put like 80 grand in overtime. Right? Because that's what.
We had something higher this year, didn't we? What did we have in this year's budget? Do you have the warrant article there?
I do,
No, you
but
don't.
it doesn't
Yeah.
have,
Doesn't have the amount?
no, it doesn't break it down.
You mean initially, because it was third, right? But you're saying it was initially.
Well,
But the overtime budget was to cover for that training period for the services, so for full staff, necessarily have to carry the same.
Well, the last chief was using overtime to fully staff the shifts, to staff up to 4 in a shift.
That was huge.
It
It's
was
like more than
huge.
100,000, 120.
And this fire chief has a staff of 4, but only fills up to 3 if people are out.
It was over budget, close to 95,000, we hadn't even got through the first of the year. Like 2 years ago.
So we budgeted up on the
Okay, so we went up. I thought we were,
So we budgeted 100, and came in at 43.
no, 100 for this upcoming year.
Oh, okay.
Budgeted 30 and it came in at
we're saying is we budgeted 100 and it's come in at 140.
No, we budgeted at 30 and it's coming in at 75.
Which year do you want?
Yeah.
For the current year?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of 25, yeah, so we were 30.
Yeah, the current year we budgeted
100.
Fiscal year 24. Just
But in
in,
30, it came in at 75. For the next fiscal year, 25, we budgeted 100 something.
Which is more than,
But we should have, I think we should have been 25 grand below.
these, but I think that the. Why can't I find public safety? Oh, there it is.
Page 119 of the budget book.
Oh, no, I'm looking at the report she just sent us.
Yeah, I'd like to make a little clarification and some detail on the fire OT. So we actually spent 160,000 in overtime for fire in fiscal 2024, but that was offset by additional funds that were left over in the regular fire salary line. So the 70,000 is like a net.
And then it looks to me like in 2023, we spent 344,000 in OT.
Correct.
That was probably the year.
So,
That's why we budgeted 30.
so Andrew, what you're saying is to be totally detail specific, we actually spent not 74,000 in OT, we spent in 2024, it was
170.
170, but like you
Yes.
said, there was some subtraction of 100 from regular salary.
Correct.
I don't know, what is that?
Well, they had their actual salary over what was budgeted in fire for 2024 was 96,000.
So they were down on staff. I guess. They had a position.
Yeah, they didn't hire some people right away.
And somebody left. Right,
Yes.
paramedics left,
the transition period is kind of,
yeah.
it's transitions.
So we fund salary, assuming everyone's gonna be there every day. Okay, does that answer OT?
I'm good on you.
Okay.
I'd like to ask about legal.
Yes,
So can someone just give me the big picture? So overall on legal last year, what did we spend? Overall,
we,
For 24,
yes, 24, yes, yes.
oh, 295,000. According to the year end budget,
Thank you.
and in 2023. We spent 212,000.
So what do we anticipate given the transpiring, events that as we go forward into 25, as we in 25,
I think it's
we budget
significantly low.
significantly lower, like what would you estimate? Half of that? Half of for 24? I mean, I keep getting confused.
Yeah, I would say you should be in that 100,000.
Really?
I mean, we-
25?
We finished the 40B appeal filings, which took a lot of time, right?
But that is extremely expensive.
40B legal drops off for fiscal 25?
Yes,
It should be pretty much non-existent because HGC is gonna be so small.
That's obviously good to hear, but
It's with
That was-
HGC now, so it's
Right.
dead in the water.
there's
And that
literally,
doesn't take a lot of ongoing legal while it's in their hands.
no, there's
That's-
nothing to do.
They filed everything they could file. Yeah.
It's a waiting game.
Will it be final decision at that point, or will there be another round of counties? If-
Well, depends if somebody's gonna lose in that decision.
Yeah.
Yes,
And the question is, whoever loses, do they file an appeal to the courts?
We're basically, right, and it's basically, the only leg we have to stand on is if we had some shovel ready affordable housing project.
That wouldn't matter.
It was,
It's
No,
water
it's too
over the
late.
dam. It's what was there when they filed the
they filed
application.
the application.
and we budgeted 150 for 25. At least that's what I see. Is that
Okay.
correct? If I'm reading correctly? I'm just trying to look forward from our past.
I don't
We should
have
be,
25.
legal is one of those areas that we have some control, but not a lot of control. And I,
And we were doing very well for a number of years, and then this next 2 years.
Right.
Really,
Well, we had all sorts of issues with that recodification.
Okay.
That became very expensive.
I look at it the other way, to run what we can do. If we have like,
Yeah.
if we get stuck in the 40B, like, you gotta grab lawyers
Right.
and what you gotta do, right?
I mean, with ZBA appeals, we leave it up to the property owner defendant to support
The town,
the appeal. Yeah, that the town legal doesn't,
see,
I mean, they represent us, but they're not proactive. They're just reacting to paperwork that's brought to them. We just made that decision.
so if we look to 25, Greg, with 150, I think having been appropriated, we should be under that, those anticipations, we should be in pretty good
I
shape.
think we'll be, barring,
I know, I'm not asking you to interview, I'm just trying to get a sense from the past, what current events indicate about this year, that's all I'm trying to.
anticipating a much calmer year.
Yeah, okay.
Well, let me ask this way, out of all the legal fees in fiscal 2024, what percentage was related to 40B, you said? Half?
More than that.
More than that, so then.
Okay, yeah, so it should.
So if that drops, then,
Right.
there you go.
Okay, that's what I'm driving, thank you. I'm not set, so.
Any other items under the FinCom reserve?
Oh, where did the salary reserve account? Was that in,
That was approved,
Town meeting.
I'm trying to remember. which one it was.
was it part of the
So it
general?
was a special town meeting because contracts were not finalized. When we had approved. the
Oh,
annual budget.
okay, that's what that was,
And
yes.
so an additional 50,000
Okay.
to the salary reserve account
I agree.
in anticipation.
Okay.
And it made more sense to do that
Yeah,
than
I
to
remember.
bring every line for town meeting. Okay.
So if I translate your closing sentence in your first paragraph of your cover email, no additional supplemental appropriation is needed. That tells me that between the transfers within the various governmental areas, plus the existing reserve account balance, we're covered with respect to, okay, I just want to translate that this time.
Yes.
We don't have to go before town meeting.
Yes, okay. Between all those pieces, we are. Thank you.
I mean, even in that case, we wouldn't be, in my opinion, going for more money, we would just be going for approval to take cash out of the cash, right?
It needs more appropriation, but
Yes.
more taxation.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
On the, legal again. What is the funding, health, life insurance? So
So the health insurance account, we're basically
That's
taking
where we're taking-
unexpended funds from the health insurance account to cover
yep.
the overage.
Good.
And we'll cover
We can
that
talk about that.
separately.
I was gonna say, talk about that later, but I'm gonna give towards the eye, but.
But mainly, for example, the youth firefighters, they all opted out of their health insurance.
Wow.
We've stuck to their spouse's health insurance. So we are seeing a little bit of benefit, right? So all new hires have to pay 35%.
Got it.
So I think we're seeing some movement because of
It was like 160 grand.
Yeah.
Below.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we approve these transfers from FinCom?
Can I put one more on the casualty property? What is this Ed and Maria and Harbor insurance?
Votes.
So the ever had good coverage votes. And so we added that and then the additional expense for the launch.
That's just like,
There's added coverage for the launch, so it's
the first thing you said, that's just what liability, someone slips and falls on the dog.
more underinsured,
Underinsured, like not insured.
now insured.
Why wouldn't that have come from the harbor fund?
Okay, let's not discuss that part.
Okay.
We're just talking about the FinCom reserves.
Yeah.
And I want to make the motions so we can approve the FinCom reserves. Then we'll move on to salary reserves, and then we'll move on to interdepartmental transfers. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to transfer $109,000 from reserve with the items listed in the spreadsheet
and the accounts listed,
in the accounts listed.
Second.
40 seconds. Any discussion? Vote, Dean,
Yes.
Yes.
Peter, Maureen,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes. Okay. What was that? And that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have to write down the vote count. Okay. So now we have the salary reserve. Using for both COLA increases and for some additional hours. Right. So we didn't need all of the 50,000 for COLA increases. And,
Right, there was some,
okay, and the COLA increases. Am I correct? We had budgeted 2.5% for all department heads and for
staff.
staff.
Yeah.
But the actual percent came in was 3?
Or
3. Okay, so this is the difference between the 2.5% increase and the 3%. In what department heads?
So got it. Yeah, clerk was,
Does that mean department head also got the 3.5?
year, so 24 was the first year, so 24 was 3.
Okay,
24 was 3.5, 2.5, which was the budget. That 50,000 was to cover that extra percent.
okay.
And just be sure I'm pretty great. It went from 2.5 to 3.5.
Right.
And the reserve was sufficient. It's not sufficient to cover that increase.
Basically sufficient to cover that standing increase, and then there was some additional funds used to cover the overtime issues.
Okay, that I understand. Yes. But as to the increase, it was sufficient in that itself for the increase. Okay, thank you.
And it also covered to pay the lifeguard salaries more. To hire lifeguards, it looks like.
But Marcus, on the appeal salary sets up about 13,000, is that? Do you anticipate that happening this coming year, or is that an anomaly?
So we'll have a different arrangement for this coming year. For the current, new year that just started, we'll have a new arrangement, not there yet, but we will be hiring a clerk to take care of both planning and zoning.
One of the problems I see is with the minutes that are being taken for meetings is people taking the minutes are not in the room. And the audio from some people on the boards is very, very bad. So you can't really hear them. So I think it takes much longer to do minutes than it was before we went to hybrid meetings and didn't have the audience.
I think the clerk should be able to.
I agree.
Well, we should speak up. I mean, is that a solution or is that not?
It's a goal.
Speak up, knows we ought to be able to hear and what you're saying.
Yes, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're also experimenting with some AI technology. We're at least draft minutes.
Oh, yeah.
We've been having some success, and we're looking to roll that out for everyone.
That's,
I mean, there are some people who tend to mumble.
oh, I appreciate it.
Nobody seems to complain about my voice.
I noticed the time I called in, it was difficult to understand.
So, yeah, it is difficult.
Your meetings online, it is interesting, some people just don't transmit as well.
Right, yeah.
It's mainly this room. The other room was.
Oh, Gail was telling you seven's worse, I don't know.
It's extremely difficult for me to hear Greg when he's back to the speaker because the speaker's in the display. It's not above your head. Thanks.
Very with cable versus in-house.
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the transfers from the various account numbers on your spreadsheet in the salary reserve account?
$50,000.
The total of
You
50.
do have that motion.
Peter makes a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any seconds, any discussion? Vote, Dean,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes.
Hey, Andrew, can you remind me, what did we make the FinCom reserve number for 2025?
Sure, it's, I believe it's 150, but let me just verify.
Yeah, it is 150.
Yeah.
The 150.
Yeah.
So now we get, what's this? So now we get to these interdepartmental transfers. Oh. Any questions on any of those? Do you have more questions on the health insurance piece?
I have a question, just mechanically, we're pulling from two of these on snow removal. And I know how much you can decrease or increase snow removal is a function of the past year history, probably like no snow. removal. We're okay doing this, and does this put us in a bad place next year?
No, it doesn't. It's what you appropriate, what you spent.
This word been let go.
It's a rolling average, like, I think it's 5-year average.
I think
Of
their
what you
only
spent.
concern,
Of what you spent.
Right.
I think
So
their
what you
only,
get budget.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on here, I think, is we had a light,
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
this.
so we're taking money out to whatever, put towards ABC. And if we hit, let's say we hit 100% of the snow, like, obviously that's not a problem either, other than the fact we would have this extra cash to pull out to.
Right.
Right. The only issue, my understanding is like, if you start lowering that fuel budget number and then you start coming in above it, like year after year, that's the problem.
right, because it's the only budget you can roll forward into the next year. So the state's concerned about you under budgeting
Right, exactly.
and being able to roll it over, whereas no other, you can't do that with any other account.
Right, but that's the other way, that would be like, if we budgeted 100 and we spent 200.
Right.
And then we just kept doing that, that's the problem, yeah.
That's what the state wants to guard against.
Sure.
So we're able to use that because we underspent the 5-year average.
When we spent the past, but what was budgeted for 24, we didn't need it all.
Yeah, right.
It's really just that 1 year.
So we're pulling from snow, we're pulling from healthcare.
Yep.
That right there is how much, that's over grand, right?
Yeah.
Healthcare is 150,
I was inside about 160.
yeah, 150.
So nice, it
So
was
that's right, 30 and 20, yeah.
53,000 from snow and ice.
Yeah, probably 200 just.
And 41.5 from trash.
So what was the unexpected equipment repair? For the 20,000.
It was the front end loader,
Oh, we're getting a new one? No.
not this year, we got it back.
They're all the same to me. Buckets on it.
Is the front end loader gonna be all right now? Or is it?
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, it was literally fucking.
Doesn't take much.
So this is saying that we don't have May and June trash bag invoices yet, so that means that's gonna be in the 2025 budget, because she doesn't have the invoices.
No, I think she's anticipating.
Yeah, I'm estimating.
You're
I don't have those
estimating.
invoices, yes.
She's estimating.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same that we estimated by trash collection, and it's showing up in 41 grand.
Or it's the tonnage less, or it was that.
So the dumpster, the dumpsters,
Oh,
we weren't charged for the dumpster collection.
oh.
We're
Okay,
getting a deal.
But I don't think I can open the right file, so just what's the total amount that we came in under adding up all, and then that's the amount we should come to other. You know what I mean, like the 160.
265, 608.
Okay, so we came in 265 grand on this, and this. Pushing it over here to places that needed it because they came in high. Right. That's right. So the 265 lower was, you said healthcare, snow, trash.
Trash collection,
I'm actually,
and just a little piddly other
A
stuff.
couple of miscellaneous ones, but yes.
yeah. The salaries are income,
We had it all.
they had it all up.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, true.
particularly about the trash and sanitation. Although there's a new contract soon, right?
Still a couple years. Well, we look great, is probably up this year. As it's like this.
I mean, glass half full approach says he's accounts over here came in 265 high, but then over here, he's just 3. Came in 265 lower, so you're a little bit right. You didn't even have to scour more than 3 accounts.
Well, there's a few miscellaneous ones, but basically.
There's like workers' comp, a little piddly,
Just, yeah. 1,000 here, 5,000 there.
election registration.
Now, I have a question. If we had a higher FinCom reserve budget, would that money have stayed in those budgets for future years?
No.
It just goes to the rate.
It just goes, slowly goes back to the fund balance.
That one big gutter,
Yeah, that's it.
drain pipe.
So I have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve grants for from various departments, cover expenses for the listed accounts, $5,608.
I have a second. Any discussion? Take a vote. Dean,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes.
That's why I don't see the need for a high FinCom reserve, right? It's- You've got, you know what I mean, like, you'd have to have everything go wrong. You'd end up in a true spot.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the CST financial review. Very late today, they sent something out.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to look at it, I'm sorry.
It's
Too late.
I think we still have a few open issues with, additional fire issue. I think one of the issues that, I know that the fire chief is pushing to have more staff to cover the 2 in, 2 out, to have 4 people on duty all the time.
Yeah.
And my guess, without talking to him, is that he would feel that would become more important once we get CST up and running with all the chemical stuff.
When would that be roughly time?
They're planning, they have a construction budget through 2027. So occupancy probably is going to be end of 27 or beginning of 28.
Call it 4 years.
That's phase one.
That's phase one.
And more to be
Yeah.
added at like 2030.
No, understood. I'm just trying to say, before 4 years,
Right.
there's nobody working it, because the building is.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
Just construct.
And,
Right.
and in talking to the assessor, she indicated that, she would do interim assessments during the construction phase on June 30th, based on the portion of the construction that's complete. We reviewed the Fournier report. We felt that their revenue projections were understated. We did go to CST and get their construction budget, so we're able to get more accurate numbers on the actual building permit fees.
Who's there, just some independent
He's-
consultant.
Yeah, he's a they, as part of the planning board filing, they were required to do a financial analysis, so they had to hire an outside consultant to do that financial analysis.
I think
And that's who CST hired.
Yeah, CST, right?
Right,
They hired this firm to present a financial analysis.
Okay.
are they the same firm that did the SL? The names.
They didn't have to have a financial analysis.
But they didn't.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was a different company. I'm not sure.
All right, good, sure.
So CSD hired this independent.
Right, and we're
firm
doing
to
the
do a high level financial analysis, just talking about projected property tax revenue to the town, and then any potential increased costs.
so,
Increased services.
yeah, the report assumed an assessed value of $217 a square foot. And looking at the report, that seemed to us to be a little low. It was a reasonable comparable, but it was New England Biolabs, which is in Ipswich. I think Manchester's assessments tend to be higher than Ipswich. And I looked at the assessments for the Harbor Point office condos, and those range from 300 to 400 square foot.
Which?
40 Beach Street. So the feeling is that their report was understating the revenue. They added,
Okay, in that sense, you see, it's big
Fournier.
project.
It's the Fournier report that we're reviewing.
Right, I just want to
Yeah.
know who the pay was.
They did a calculation, based on additional calls for the fire and the police department. But our sense is that the number of calls was so low that we wouldn't have to have additional staffing. So they had assumed tax revenue of $597 and expenses of $35,000 for a net positive fiscal impact of $562 in
Obviously,
taxes.
anybody can get a consultant that's gonna say ABC, right? But at the end of the day, what is the final, you know, the arbitrator, decision maker? Judge?
Oh, no, this is just giving information to the planning board.
No, I know, I'm just saying, what I'm saying is 4 years down the road, when, let's say, the thing is. Take the time, there's gonna be employees and
The
Yeah.
assessor determines.
the assessor,
Yes.
but has tight rails or no? Like state, I don't know.
I'm gonna talk to her again. She was talking to her, commercial person at Patriot Properties. Because Manchester doesn't have anything like
Right, well, that's
this.
It's a little harder in this case because it's a one-off, right?
Yeah,
100% agree,
so
but that,
yeah,
that's why I'm trying to figure out.
So, yeah, she'll reach out to, Patriots is our consulting firm that helps with assessing. She'll reach out to other
she talked to Ipswich, who is the New England Biolabs.
standards where they already are.
Yeah,
Like to your point, high level, you're saying 40 meters, 400 a square foot, is that what you said?
no, I said 40 Beach,
Yeah,
which is office condos,
sure,
Yeah.
but that's 300 to 400 square foot,
right,
this is coming to 200,
right.
that's it. That's a big cap.
But it's lab, I mean. those-
So the sense, and they said that only 20% of the space was for the labs. The rest is office space and the parking structure.
Right, so office to office, apple to apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, the sense is that the Fournier report understated the potential revenue So it's more of a financial benefit to the town than their report indicated, this kind of thing.
I think from the applicant's point of view, they'd rather understate. And
I didn't know if it's that, better to, whatever, understate and over deliver, or I didn't know if it's more like trying to guiding towards.
probably a combination of both.
Guiding towards the endpoint that they want,
Yeah, but that endpoint is not going to be influenced by.
Sarah, what do we
By the
think for the
projection.
expense projections? I know you're talking about that is the
We-
town's increased expense.
Well, we talked to Chuck. And the construction of the connection to the water and sewer is covered by the $3.5 million grant, and any additional is being paid by CST. So we shouldn't have an expense there. The water and sewer capacity, Chuck has indicated that it's sufficient to include the CST project, the SLB project, and any additional new units under the MBTA zoning plan that was submitted to the state for review. So it seems like we have the sufficient capacity. And the way the water and sewer rates are done is to set rates. The select board sets the rates, and their past policy has been to set rates which will cover the expenses of the water and sewer enterprise funds. So we shouldn't have additional expenses for water and sewer that are not covered by the water and sewer fees. So the only additional piece that we haven't really honed down on is whether the fire chief is gonna want more staff. We think he wants it anyway.
The police?
Police, no, fire. Police
I
doesn't need
understand
any
fire.
more staff.
Police question mark?
No.
A bigger thing with fire is they might need some training, on some of these hazards.
Right.
The bio
Yeah.
hazards.
Right.
And we might need some equipment.
Well, that's what we haven't quite
Did it come up,
connected.
is this a manufacturing process? Did they estimate how much water they would need?
20,000 gallons.
And that's
Right.
So,
Okay.
according to them, their use for both water and sewer is mostly the domestic issue. They're not discharging any chemicals into the sanitary system.
Right.
They're not using it in their manufacturing process.
So it's just for the.
It's just, yeah, it's literally for the office and they have a gym, like.
Like, can I go back to the property tax side of things? So I'll use their 600 just because I don't want to debate that one, right? But so if it does turn out 600, that 600 won't start until 4 years from now.
Well, we'll get
Before,
incremental pieces.
But that's where my next question is. So should I think of that incremental as like a hockey stick or like straight line linear or?
Well, the 600 is for the end of phase 2.
I thought that was under phase 1.
No, their calculation was for end of phase 2.
That's both, okay.
So half of it is,
Okay,
fiscal year 2028, and then the other half is fiscal year 2034.
okay, so you're saying
Yeah.
300 grand comes on in 4 years? Roughly, if you
Yeah.
use their.
Yeah.
Yep,
And we might have small increments along the way.
so. You understand my question,
yes,
is it this from 0 to 300 or is it like this or?
I think it's going to be irregular.
I mean, they're,
Pick up building permits along the way
They're-
too. So
yeah, they're
we
building-
start with building permits and then we go to property tax, so
They're-
it's a transition along. the
their
way.
construction budget is like a couple of million 2024, 9 million in 2025. I think it's 56 million in 2026 and 49 million or 40-odd million in 2027. Those are calendar years.
Yep, I got you.
So we figured that we would get the building fees of about 400,000 in both 2026 and 2027.
I'm not, sorry.
400,000 in building fees in each of 2026 and 2027, which would kind of be before the tax revenue really kicks in. And only a few thousand in 2024 and 2025.
Our commercial residential rate is the same, right?
Right.
Which. Pretty low, right?
That's what we're saying.
The rates.
No, I mean,
Because another
compared to other towns.
Yes,
Oh, yes,
yes.
yes.
So the select board has the option each year of setting different rates for commercial and residential, and they haven't done it because we haven't had.
Sure.
That's a small
There's
commercial
not much
base. You
commercial.
have to whack those commercials really hard for very small savings on the residential side.
Yeah, no, where I'm going is, if you just take our commercial rate, which again is the same as our residential, I think
Yeah.
it's somewhere between 10 and 11, right?
Yeah.
And you compare that to commercial rates other places around us, we look cheap.
Correct.
That's all, yeah.
But you gotta figure in the value of the land is more here, so you're still paying, the rate could be down, because like,
Yeah, for residential, I'm with you, but for commercial,
I don't think that's.
It depends how much it's assessed per square foot.
Yeah.
Whether it's higher than the rest of the market or not.
I was projecting revenue for year 6. That's our, we're in 25 this moment, and then 26. I could look at roughly $400,000.
No,
No,
no. In fiscal year 2026, there's between 16 and 70,000 of building permits,
okay,
somewhere in that range.
and what you find.
plus some taxes.
There might be some taxes
Yes, some
depending on, but they're not gonna be very far along, so it's gonna be minimal. Because the majority of construction is hitting in calendar year 26 and calendar year 27. I don't know whether that's front end loaded or, you know.
So might we see 100,000?
Yeah, and that's what I'm taking away from.
Yeah, yeah.
That's helpful, that's. what
So
I'm
it's a
trying to-
ways out.
Yeah, I understand, but I was trying to go back to your, what can we look at as being likely, you're saying 100,000 would be roughly hit in the next fiscal year.
And I think the good news was they did give us a construction budget for phase 2, which would be in the 2030 to 2034.
Yeah, say, so it's 35 over.
Well, that's assuming that, yeah. They finish it.
Yeah,
Before
yeah,
the
say fully
assessment
assessed in,
in
not until.
fiscal year 35, yeah.
I don't wanna jump topics, because I know it gets slammed, but just we talked about how many gallons of water they're projected to use, so what bucket does that put them in?
In terms of tiers,
Yeah,
is when they get there.
It's over 16,000.
so it's 20,
I mean. It's all estimates at this point, and I'm not so sure that they're really gonna get 20, we're reserving 20,000, honestly, which would put them into highest tiers.
yeah.
Okay, so if people can take a look at what I sent out and just let me know if you have any concerns about anything that's in there. If not, then we'll go ahead and fine tune it with additional information and then submit it to the planning board, or do we want another meeting to officially approve it?
It's necessary to another meeting on it.
I agree high level with the, analysis saying it's probably whatever, under promising and will over deliver, but better that way than the other way, right?
Exactly. And I think that when Maury, Andy looked at the construction piece to see if the prices were reasonable. The Fournier report was assuming what, 350 per square feet?
No, the construction estimate was like just under 1,000.
Well, that was what they gave us in the construction budget, but the Fournier report, I thought had more like 300 to 350. Yeah, so that was way understated, and that's why we went to them to ask for a construction budget, just to get a better sense of what we may expect. Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if it's 600 in revenue.
Yeah.
And whatever it was, 30, 40 in increased service costs, I'd still do it every day of the week and twice on Sunday, right?
Right.
So,
That's a good thing.
I mean, if the revenue comes in higher, which sounds to me like it should,
nobody
then
will complain.
that's good, right?
The logic of the report was really good, and if you say, okay. Police and fire estimated low by factor 2x. And the revenue was budgeted low because they don't wanna.
Right.
It's still Worst case, it's still a win-win-win across the board.
I guess what I'm saying, the only reason I even care about that chair report is if somehow that report guided what will be the final,
No.
which I don't, that's not the case, so therefore.
The reason we looked at it is because we were asked to do a peer review of it. So that's what FinCom was doing. Yeah. Yeah. We didn't feel we needed to go into a great amount of detail because it was clear that it was.
Carry forward, up it up and.
Yep.
submit it.
Yep.
It's like a copy when you do that.
Next item on the agenda is the launch service status update. Do we have an update on money? How it's going with expenses and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so there are 80 or 81 subscribers this season. Break-even number was, that would be 72. So from that big picture, it's solid. Things are going fairly well in terms of the actual service. Been able to meet the demand. It's obviously busier than it was in previous years because there's 20-some odd more subscribers. But they're able to keep up with demand. They have done a few tours in between. That's bringing in close to an extra 2,000 so far. A little pickup with the one vote, but that's been fixed. So I think overall, it's hitting the projections and exceeding them, and the service seems to be functioning well.
The expense side of it is within projection.
Yeah, we're below the projection.
Where do we, or how do we advertise for those opportunities? Let's just word of mouth, but.
Yeah, he's got a sandwich one sign, really not being pushed heavily.
Told me he was working on getting something onto some site.
That would be that one. It's on that one.
Not what.
Dot one.
That's the same idea as when you want to pay the fact people.
Yep, and there's a note that there are arbiters there.
Thank you, Ann.
And what do we charge for an arbiter?
$20 a person. That was on the sandwich board 3 or 4 days ago.
Right, and then you can rent it for a half hour or something. You can do
I don't know. I just saw the $20 on the sandwich board.
two different ways. You can buy the person, or you can
By the time.
buy the time.
How's the general dock water revenue, you know? Not, you know.
Yeah, just do the transit boats. Yeah, I think it's tracking a little above last year. I don't know the exact number.
Okay.
You had a big week last week.
Is that,
You had a big week last week.
yes,
What are we, high level, you know, we plugged in for a summer for
with the income.
that? Yeah, from fancy boat tying up dock water.
Yeah, in the mid-30s.
The 30 grand.
I think he talked about it about 35 or 36 last year.
It's not bad.
And just see if it's on this report too.
I got a gut feel that the Marblehead guy's gonna copy it.
Andrea, do you carry that harbor stuff on a separate line? I don't see it separately on the local receipts.
No, it's all included in the fees. It's all lumped in with all the other fees. I don't have it separated
Okay,
on that report.
you have the information, but not on the report.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay. So maybe in the fall, we can get from Andrea that actual.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cycle has to be said, you know, but after the season is over, let's have
Yeah.
have the debrief on how long went financially, what was operational.
And on the transient voting fees too,
Yeah.
just to. Next item on the agenda is water and sewer rate structure. So. Oh, sorry, Mary Foley, do you have a question?
Hi, Mary Foley, One Pulaski Drive. I actually have two questions, one from the discussion prior, if I may ask, since Chuck Dam is there, though I can barely hear him. My question with the cell signaling was just that you had said 20,000 gallons of water, and I just asking for clarity if that includes their irrigation system.
I haven't seen that they're proposing an irrigation system. I would have told them not to bother using town water for irrigation. That 20,000 is based on other facilities that they have. And so it would, if, I assume they don't have irrigation, because I know they're in Danvers and they're not allowed to. So my guess is that's just their domestic use for the facility and the occupants.
Okay, because at the last planning board meeting, they clarified that they were going to have an irrigation system. So maybe if we could get updated numbers.
Typically, it's just to, get the plants started once they, finish their, site work, and they're gonna have significant plantings, but I don't think it's their intention to do it in perpetuity, but I'll follow up and ask. I don't know.
That'd be great. Thank
That's
you.
just an all-in round number.
And then I think just because the audio is so bad, with the launch update, I thought I heard Greg say that there was 20 more subscribers, and I know at town meeting, the threshold was 70, so I'm just trying to get clarity on that number.
It's 80, we have 81 or 82 subscribers.
Okay, thank you.
The break even was 72.
But the 20 delta is your,
The 20 delta is last year versus this year.
so 60 up to 80, but the threshold was 7.
Exactly right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Jean. So the next item on the agenda is water and sewer rate structure. It's my understanding the select board recently approved water and sewer rates based on consumption. And the question is what we feel about an additional base fee, flat fee being added to cover infrastructure costs that may not be related to consumption. In other words, do we get all the money for water and sewer through consumption rates? Or do we consider adding a flat fee that would give a base stream of income for capital projects?
And if I understand correctly, the argument in favor of that is stability of revenue. That's a major argument.
Yeah, we'll let Chuck speak to it. I just wanted to set the ground. So we're not talking about what rates, we're just talking about theory.
The rates part is done and done.
Yes, I've already decided.
Right, and it's like,
Well, the metric rate is done.
yeah,
So the rate's based on how much water you consume.
Yeah.
That's what the board has established. What is up for debate, and further discussion is whether or not we should have a capital fee in essence.
Right, I guess that's why I said rates done, because I call this other than something else, like
Yeah.
capital fee.
Yeah.
Okay, the rates part is done. Okay, correct, sorry to exercise you.
Close that box, all right? Open it all back up.
you wanna see the whole screen?
So I think that pretty much, summarizes where we're trying to go. You may recall last January, we started discussing this both with yourselves as well as the select board. Now we're kind of in the midst of our rate setting. And so the question is, when and how much, if at all, does the capital fee go into effect? So, rather than, keep jerking around with the rates or the structure, get it all done now. I put together these slides. If you don't want me to go through them, I don't have to, but I can do it fairly quickly. I did it both for water and sewer, but as Sarah mentioned, the The water is really where we're looking at the capital fee. The sewer, I haven't proposed it and it hasn't been adopted by the select board. That was strictly the volumetric fee, which does cover 75% of the capital, which has been the standard practice in town. So these are just kind of showing, these slides that I'll walk through real quick are just showing, where the money goes when we collect revenue in the form right now of volumetric rates. And I laid out some of the kind of shortfalls that we're having, as well as, where we would end up with a capital fee. So just high level water system, the picture on the right is actually from our last water main break, which is, stamped on the side of the pipe, Manchester, 1891, which is the year it's installed, which as you guys know, I've put it on the screen before, is, 80-90% of all the pipe in town is this same vintage. And then the capital projects that both have, we ongoing, but also, coming up, the meter system. So we're looking at a new meter, not only the meter that, measures the water through your pipes, but also, sends that signal back to the town. Or right now we're in a drive-by system, which reads the meter. This would be upgrading that to a either cell or radio frequency that would broadcast it back to town hall, to the water sewer office, and then that's how we would generate the bills. But it also gives the added benefit of letting users see their usage in real time. Then we have the ongoing pipe rehab and rehabilitation. This year, as was mentioned for CST, we are relaying the pipe on Forest Street, as well as sewer on Forest and Mill, which doesn't have sewer right now. And then we also approved the Pleasant Street cleaning lining, which is similar to the School Street work that we did a couple of years ago, so we're not digging up the entirety of the street, it's pits along the way. And then the big one is the PFAS coming down the way. We got approval actually yesterday for the piloting up at Gravelly Pond. So that'll be a 24-week process of piloting. And then we will go into design and construction based on the results of that piloting.
Piloting means what here, Chuck?
We're sending our specific water through the different media to understand what kind of treatment we will get, and we need to pick the one that obviously gives us the best treatment. That's what we're looking at. It'll also inform other decisions we make on the design after these. That is actually being paid for out of ARPA funds left over from a couple of years ago. So not out of the capital on the town side or the just a quick pie chart here showing the salary, operating expense, treatment, obviously the big one on the water side, which includes chemicals, also the electricity. Those are the big ticket items. Also the contract ops, because the treatment plant itself, we don't have town employees. We hire out to third party. We have the appropriated capital, which is, that's just for kind of standard upgrades along the treatment plant, replacing pumps every, when they go down, or various other, one-off kind of quirky projects that. And then we have the indirect debt, which is transferred from the enterprise fund over to the general fund for different salaries. You recall we hired the clerk of the works, which was split up between the separate ones, also for insurance for the staff that is on the, so that's kind of where that money moves around. And then the salary, operating and expenses, our water and sewer collection system, distribution system, and the town employees that are on the enterprise fund. This is just the water side. So this is just a quick revenue and expenses line chart from the last few fiscal years. I will note that the revenue is not perfect because we don't bill according to fiscal years, and the rates aren't set exactly. There's 2 months in the new fiscal year, 1 month in the old. So it's just based on the preceding 4 quarters of revenue when we do the big quarterly billings. So you see, it does kind of bounce a little bit all over the place, but the bottom line is our expenses approved in FY25, so what we just started, are roughly 1.5 million. Our preceding 4 quarters of revenue were 1.339, therefore a shortfall. We do have some retained earnings in the enterprise fund itself, so for FY25 at least, we will have drawn down what was there to pay the bills.
What will the new volumetric rates generate? Am I jumping ahead of the slide?
Yeah, so we did recalibrate the volumetric rates. We do have tiers, so it's not perfect across all tiers, but the lower tiers were approximately 7% to make up that gap. So here's that slide. You can see that this is the FY 24. Another recommendation that had come out of the task force and prior meetings with the select board was to consolidate the tiers a little bit because we had 6. So you can see for FY 24, at least if I had consolidated to 4, I would have just combined the bottom 2 and the top 2 to make it a little bit clearer. And there really wasn't a big enough spread in the usage and the rate to see a discernible difference.
And what does the average home typically use? Where do they fall in the average home?
So that's a tough one to answer, but
Okay, and you
I do have a couple examples at the end, so maybe I'll come back to that one. So this is what was approved for volumetric rates in FY 25. So the 4, you know, those bottom 2, the 721 and 814 are roughly, you know, this is going back now, that 682 and that 750 are what bumped up to be these. So that's approximately 7%. And I have another, but
What's in the far right column?
so that's the cumulative. So this is a progressive rate here. So no matter who you are, what your average consumption is, your first 1,700 cubic feet in FY 25 are going to cost you 721. And then, so that 721 times 17 gets you your $122. But then if you go into the next year, depending on where you're at, you're going to pay 814. And if you get all the way to the top, that 5,700 is the delta between the two. So 5,700 minus 17 is approximately 4,000 cubic feet. So it's 40 times 814, not the full 57.
Right.
So here's the number I'm looking for, and I don't know if this is gonna be an off the top, but I'm looking for the delta of like, you know, you collected this much at the prior rates in that fiscal year, and now with the new volumetric rates, assuming the same water usage, you're gonna.
Yeah, so you can see that 1,700, this is FY 24, is approximately $114 for your bill. So if you use just, and this will come up later, but if you're a family of 2 and you're using a regular amount, your bill is gonna be $114.
I'm talking,
I'll get there.
okay.
This year, it will be 122. So if you're a family of 2 that use the 1,700 in a quarter, your bill went up 7. And that's across every bill. And so I don't have the slide for.
Retention and use may require a review.
So,
You know, I'm looking for a number of like 100 grand or something, 50 grand. It's like, I'm talking the aggregate, like,
yeah, so we have approximately,
it's a big number. I don't.
yeah, it's hard to say exactly. So in. If you don't know the spreadsheet. But, so the quarterly commitments that we get every year or every quarter when we read bills fluctuate quite a lot.
Sure.
So in, you know, the 2 winter quarters are, it's cut in half. So we basically, you know, we might bring in on the water side, 200,000 in the winter quarter. I'm sure, October to January. And then that next year, or the preceding quarter, you know, July to August or September, that would be, you know, triple or double. So 200 now to 600. And so at the end of the year, it's 130, well, 1.3 million. So, you know, those. See what I'm saying?
I know there's all kinds of variables.
The estimate would be instead of 1.4 million,
Yeah,
we hope to be closer to the 1.5.
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, that's what we're.
Well, you're gonna get 100.
Grand double. Assuming same usage, which to your point, changes all over the place, I get it, but I'm just, for budgetary estimation purposes,
Yeah.
you just look at, you know, prior year's usage, multiply times the new rates, and you end up with an extra.
But you can see, and this was another recommendation that the select board wanted, was to penalize, if you will, the top tiers more. So it's not just a strict 7% across the board. So we actually may, depending on the year, in the summertime especially, see even if we were double before, it might be triple the revenue. We don't know, and so we see people either conserve or not based on.
So given that, I'll plug like 100, but to your point, it could actually be considerably more if people don't change their water usage based on the higher rates.
Correct.
So
So that's the story on the volumetric side. This is what I think I've shown you guys before, and what I presented to the select board was, this is just several different ways of doing it, based on meter size. So the idea is that there's a flat quarterly charge based on your meter size, that is irregardless of what you use on volumetric side. Generally, the total by size that you see across the top, that breakdown, is, fairly accurate from, nobody's really changing out their meters on a quarterly basis, but so it's kind of static in that respect. The two smaller ends, that's your regular single family home.
Okay, there we go.
They're nothing special about irrigation or,
So that's the
their number of
roughly
inhabitants.
typical,
That's your, I mean, as you can see, that's 2,000 of our 2,600 is roughly those two sides.
The first two columns?
The first two, 5/8 and 3/4. From there, you get up in the 1 inch, that's indicative of more use. But doesn't have to be, it's just a quirk of somebody's plumber or, what they've done. If they do have high irrigation, you do need a bigger meter if you have much higher volumes on an intermittent basis. So, those things all come into play.
It's not an age of the home thing though, it's more just, like you said, what your plumber, if you built a brand new big house, 8,000 square foot, you could put in a big.
So like CST at 20,000 gallons a day is likely gonna have a 2 inch meter measuring their domestic flow. They might have multiple meters, depending on how they do it. So again, there's no magic to any of this. I presented, as you can see here, if we just did a flat charge across all meters of $50 a meter.
Yeah.
Quarterly, that would roughly in annual revenue terms be about a little over 500,000. If we double that, we double the revenue, it comes up to almost $1 million or over $1 million. We could also do a gradation across sizes. So like I said, the 5/8 3/4, that's your typical. The larger meters, larger flow, more expensive meter, therefore you could reasonably say that's a higher quarterly fee. So then you could leave the 5/8 3/4 at the 50 and then, work your way up from there. It doesn't really, kind of change the story until you, depending on, where you want to go on the upper end side. Like you have to really raise because we only have a certain, 100-ish, 1.5 inch and 2 inch meters to really, generate a ton of extra revenue by that. You really have to jack up the quarterly fee. So that's all we're doing here. My recommendation, just for a starting point with the select board was the kind of gradation across the sizes. 50 seemed reasonable at the 5/8 3/4, low end, but then, it does seem reasonable to me to increase the higher end. And that would, result in $1 million. The idea of $1 million, again, no magic, it was just roughly 12.5 million bond payment. Again, roughly, because we don't know the rates and the term, but generally speaking, that seemed like a reasonable number. And as I've said before, the PFAS treatment could be up to 27 million. There will be some offsets with hopefully state grants as well as settlement money, but I don't know that number where we sit today. And so, that 12.5 is not paying for 27. So once we find out where that final 27 comes, we can adjust or not the 12.5 number. So if we wanted to pay for the entirety of that bond, if you say it was worst case 27 million, we would have to double this fee, or we'd have to do something more drastic with the rate structure. But we also, you guys all know, we have the general fund, we have other means at our disposal, I guess, different, however you guys want to look at it. I was just putting out a number to kind of start the discussion and start somewhere. I do think that this is a reasonable, this is very typical across, take PFAS out of it, just as a way to generate revenue in your enterprise funds.
So why are we doing it?
Because we have many capital expenses that are coming up, and so this is a capital fee to pay those expenses within the enterprise.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought we found that the usage was a very variable number. Did I misunderstand that?
No, it
I
is.
thought this gives a stable piece of income.
Well, it does. It all goes to the enterprise fund, but I think we are hoping that the adjusted volumetric rates cover the expenses. It will also, this fee would stabilize the enterprise fund in general. So, if we have another drawdown year of 100, 200 grand, the shortfall, then, it's covered. But this is generally so that we can appropriate the funds in every fiscal year to either authorize these larger capital projects or pay down bonds that are authorized.
So the volumetric is intended to meet the operating costs. And
That's the
the
intent.
fee is intended to meet some capital costs. Am I conceiving of this
I
correctly?
wouldn't even say it's that precise.
This is a general attempt at what you're saying.
I think that, we're getting to the point again where we're talking about accumulating money in advance of needing it, which
What?
has been somewhat contrary to what our position has been regarding the budget and tax rates.
Well, that's not 100% true in this instance or this case, because
Let me
we have
finish.
approved the bond at town meeting and fiscal year this year. And we have to pay for it. The meters,
Right, but we approved
That's
that,
fine.
we approved that before any of this. Now we're gonna add on top of volumetric increase, so that's gonna raise additional revenue, whether it's 100 grand or whatever. I mean, it's more.
but it's gonna cover the shortfall that you saw in the last 4 quarters, not necessarily any capital.
I haven't quite finished what I was saying.
Sorry.
I'm not opposed to having a flat fee because I get that. But if we're gonna say we're imposing a flat fee because it's expenses that are not impacted by volume of usage, then it makes no sense to me to have a different flat fee for different size meters. If you're gonna say it has nothing to do with, if you're gonna say it has something to do with volume of use, then you include it in your tier rates. If you're saying it's not related to volume of use, then it should be the same across the board.
I agree. I was gonna say the same thing a different way. Like, if you told me that the meter for the big pipe costs 10 times as much as the meter for the little pipe, then maybe I could start to agree that, but other than that, I agree with what you said. It should be,
Well, it is about a 5x difference.
it's a 5x difference.
About 200 for the small ones, about 1,000 for the big ones.
I have a little bit of a contrary view, which is that, for the larger services that can happen too, in particular, which tend to be, larger commercial uses, the cost of providing and owning that system that supports their use. To me, there's maybe a bigger piece of the pie there.
But it doesn't, the PFAS expense is gonna be the PFAS expense.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether you have a 2-inch water main or a 5-inch.
Right, that's the cost of the system. And you have, like, in case of CST, they're gonna take a 2-inch line size coming into the facility, and it's an outside use.
But they're gonna be paying that in their usage rates.
We're getting them a lot of the usage, right?
They're gonna pay for the usage, I get it, but it's capital costs versus operating costs. It's, and the capital, the system size that you own in order to support the various users, which are a mix of residential and commercial. They're not the same.
But take an extreme example. You have someone with a big house, but they're a snowbird. So they have very little usage. But they're gonna get dinged for this big capital amount just because they happen to have a big pipe, like.
Well, they're
But you're right on CFC because they're gonna be a big, right? And so they're a big,
right. It's the same as the electric utility. Like, if you are a large user, even if you go away for the winter and use it for half of the year, the utility company still needs to own the production power in order to support that usage per ton. Irrespective of the
But they
usage rate.
charge what, $7 an account or something, a very minimal fee.
I'm just conception.
But I'm concerned too about what determined what size pipe a person has. For all I know, I could have a 2-inch pipe. I wouldn't have a clue.
So, this has come up in terms of, execution of the meter changeout program, and, I'm willing to, as predominantly, we're looking at 5/8 and 3/4. There's not that many that are the 1.5 and 2. I don't think that, just my general feel of the system and as these projects develop, I don't think that there's a reason for a lot of these 1.5 and 2-inch meters, like the Snowbird example, or just looking at their general usage. So I'm fine with, during the project, we will ask the, you know, the users that have the 1.5 and the 2-inch, if they want to downsize. I think it'll be, you know, on that does add a little bit of complexity to the project, but it will be something that we see coming, and it'll be something that we can allow the homeowner to correct if they so choose.
But
So they would be responsible, because we're not hiring a plumber for them. They would be responsible for hiring the plumber to downsize their piping, they accept a different size meter. But we would still provide the meter,
But
you know,
is
it's a benefit to the town, going from supplying them a 2-inch meter to an inch meter or a 5/8.
is it the piping from the street to the meter?
But that's irrespective of the size meter you need, you can downsize it in your house.
Oh, you
Okay.
can.
So you have a 2-inch line coming in your house, maybe, that doesn't necessarily mean you need a 2-inch meter.
Okay,
It actually does
Do a lot of other towns already do this? A lot of other towns around
do the,
adding a flat panel?
yes.
And having it vary by size.
I'm in Wenham, I'm on the water board in Wenham, and we have a flat fee on the meter size. We're looking at doubling it or tripling it for in the interest of paying down defense.
And
What is it's, which,
So 5/8 meter is $10 right now currently, but that's without any capital project on the horizon. That's what they've been collecting every
$10
quarter
a
since I've
quarter.
been.
$10 a quarter?
Yes.
For 5/8.
That was,
But that's with no capital.
that's okay. We're gonna have.
wait,
a
well,
lot-
that's one at a time, right? Go ahead, Dean.
Well, I just think we're gonna have a lot of grant money for these PFAS plants. I mean, they funded 100% of the design.
No,
They gave us $1 million.
that's not 100%.
Well, it's 100% of Lincoln Street. I think so.
We're not there. No,
Well, yeah, it's a good chunk of it. And
Oh, for sure.
You
But
can
that was-
expect a lot more for the
That was, I totally disagree. That was a one-time earmark in the federal budget that we asked for. That not every city and town got. That was something we asked for specifically for Manchester. Otherwise we would have asked for it in Lenham and we would have received, you know.
Who has to approve this at the end of the day?
And again, I just want
Town voters or just select?
No, select board.
So I
The
just,
select board asked us for input.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get.
So that's the other reason that I don't like this stuff, because it feels like an end around.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look, at the end of the day, you have costs, you have expenses, pipes, you got all this kind of costs, and they gotta be paid for in one way or the other, right? Whether it's a user fee or taxes, right? They gotta be paid for. But at least taxes, like, you know, everybody votes on taxes, right? Particularly.
Yeah, but we vote
So-
on the appropriation of what's spent out of the enterprise fund. Town meeting does.
Right, so
Yeah, that's
those,
on the spend side, but then on the revenue or the tax side, we also approve that, right, at town meeting, particularly if it's gonna go above 2.5, right?
you actually don't, so you just approve the expense. Then, assuming it's tax funded, then it's a simple math. You take the total appraised values of town and do the math.
As long as it's below 2.5, I guess, right?
Right,
So the
So-
more we have in the enterprise fund in cash, the lower the tax rate increases. We're either paying it with a tax rate increase.
I agree,
Or flat fee to the
I
enterprise fund.
agree, you gotta take one or the other, I'm just saying,
but it's just a different,
I think it's more transparency if it's gonna pay to taxes.
so in the past, you've always used the general fund, general taxation to pay for water capital. So this is a discussion about the potential of changing. Whether or not you want to consider softening the burden on the property tax, but picking it up on the utility fee. It's coming out of the same payer,
Right, exactly.
So,
so it's a different pathway of collecting the rest. And that's the discussion that's needed, whether or not you want to alter that path or not.
so one of the ways to alter that path would probably be to start metering the town water usage, right? The sewage treatment plant, the meter flushing, all our facilities. But this is unmetered water that
it's not.
everyone in the town uses,
It's on
but only the people on the water system will pay for.
But I think
Right.
that's different.
It just, add more quick piece of information. Everybody in town is on the water, with the exception of Loading Place Road and a section of Forester Road.
So it's.
total of about a dozen, maybe a
We're
dozen.
talking about, yeah, maybe a dozen households.
So it is exactly the same buckets.
So problem, as I see it, is we have a big expense coming up, PFAS. And we're looking at where the revenue comes from for that. And on one end, if you do it totally on water rates, you basically have what we call a variable revenue source, which is dependent on how much water people use year to year, year to year. And if we have a super wet year, we don't sell as much water, so we don't collect as much revenue, and we get ourselves in trouble. On the other hand, you have a fixed revenue, which is essentially this meter project, and how do we balance those two together? And I don't think you want to go totally one way or totally the other. I think you want to blend both. But one question is, how is this revenue coming out of meters? What do we think of that as a percentage of what we anticipate total PFAS capital costs to be? I mean, we talked about PFAS like
It's
7 billion.
roughly half.
Okay.
Assuming we're in the 20 million, mid 20 million range.
Yeah.
We don't know. And we don't know the other revenues that we may get, you know, what I'm
But
saying?
it's a half the 30 years, right? If you're talking about paying off a bond.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's not half of the upfront cost.
Chuck, could you repeat for me why we have a higher fixed fee for a larger pipe? What is the logic of that again, please?
So like I said, the single family home standard would be a 5/8 3/4. So that's the smaller end, that covers most usages. As you get to the larger size pipes, that's typically associated with larger use. You get more head loss through smaller pipes, and therefore, the larger pipes, you tend to be able to get more flow through. That's just the way it is. So inevitably, that results in a larger meter.
What's the logic?
Why?
I understand it is a large flow through, I understand that. Just trying to understand why the fee is set larger for larger pipe. I understand having the fee for, I think, just what Maury was saying, we need a standard revenue source because we've got standard debt service or. But I
So-
don't understand why you have a larger
I think
fee.
it ties into what Amy said. Right,
Well,
you said a bigger
I like truck to protect.
Yeah, so I think it's partially that, and it's also, in my mind, like I said, a 2-inch meter costs significantly. It's about 5x. So it's about 1,000.
What does that have to do with the budgets that this is going to fund?
It seems reasonable that a larger upfront cost should be recouped over a larger quarterly fee.
So
And projected full.
it's the meter cost that you're trying to recover.
Well, initially, but then inevitably after that, it goes.
Right, I was gonna say, you gotta be careful there because, 10 quarters and that guy, even the expensive guy's paid off his meter,
Yeah.
basically, right? So
Yeah.
you gotta be careful tying this so specifically to the actual cost of the meter,
Yeah,
because it's much bigger than that, right?
So, hand up, I was asked to put together a presentation / proposal on what a meter fee, capital fee could look like. This is one way to do it. I told you, I live in one, I have a 5/8 meter, it's $10 a quarter forever. There's no opt-out, we're not paying it, it's not 10 quarters and I paid it off, it's forever.
What are they doing when for the higher?
I'm not done. On the higher end, they go to 50. So it
So
is a higher thing forever, not just because it's. And I don't have a perfect answer for you. They decided that's the way they wanted to do it and they voted it and did it. You don't have to.
I'm
just
not,
saying you
I'm
can.
not attacking you, I don't.
No, I know. I'm just trying. It seemed like,
What's the logic?
yeah, that's the law.
The logic is that they're a bigger user, so they're gonna pay.
Exactly.
That's as simple as that.
Yeah, okay.
Is it perfect? No.
Yeah, absolutely not. And there's a different way to call it. You don't have to call it, it doesn't have to be related to meters at all. It could just be a base fee. And that could be uniform across the way. So then that takes all this out of it. Absolutely. That's 100% a reasonable way to do it. Pick a flat fee or a base fee and we could do it that way. It just seemed the logic in my mind as we were working through it is we were asked to institute a meter program where we change our meters. And that capital cost is being driven by the side of the meters.
Thank you.
And therefore, that's where we started. But again, that was one of 4 or 5 scenarios, one of them being a flat fee.
Question?
John Rouse.
Yes, we agree, right. So I've followed all of this discussion, that Chuck has presented here. One thing I think you've got to put in context here is his typical user that he put together that was 2 people. And the vast majority, that is to say, probably 75% of the people here have water bills that are less than $100. They're probably closer to $50 or $75 a quarter, okay? So, of course, when they get their water bill, they're not only seeing water, they're also, half of the people are seeing sewer. But when you start to put a $50 bill on top of what is the $75 bill, some people, and a lot of people will see their water bills double. Okay, so there's gonna be some noise, I think, about that, and not just from a few people, because the majority of the people are in that category. As you can see, the number of people that are up using tremendous amounts of water or have 2-inch pipes, you know, there are 10, 20, 30 people. And as Chuck had mentioned, some of those folks probably have these large pipes, but they're not irrigating. For whatever reason, they've got a 2-inch pipe there, and they'll make the decision, I'll bring in a plumber for a couple of $100, I'll shrink it down to 5/8, and I'll pay the 5/8 fee, which is right now, he's suggested being $50 as opposed to $400, that absolutely pays, yeah.
Are you talking about charging both for each meter a person has?
Yes.
Oh, if they've got an irrigation meter.
Yeah, so an irrigation meter that they only use half a year.
So I didn't get to these slides, but as John was saying, so this is a family of 2, general usage. Their FY 24 water bill would roughly be, you know, annually $400 or 32. Proposed on the volumetric, that's only going up roughly $30 for the year. If it was a 5/8 meter at $50 a quarter, that is the 200 that, so yeah, that is a 50% increase in their bill for the annual. And then for the purposes of illustrating the FY 24 sewer, that's the 7% increase that was approved, is roughly $70 for the year. So I do appreciate that, again, it's only math. I don't really have a strong preference. I would just say that 2,200 to me, as somebody that's in the water industry and somebody that sees, firsthand the implications of PFAS treatment and looks at it in a different light maybe than you all. $50 a quarter is less than a Netflix. Like, that's not a significant amount of money
It's
for
less than a month.
PFAS-free water. And that's what the end goal is, so that's what the end situation will be. And I think most people, from when they talk to me at my office about, what are you doing about the PFAS thing? It's like, well, we'll get there eventually, we'll do the treatment. And then in between here and there, we need to figure out how to pay for it. And this was one way to pay for it, that didn't totally burden, the tax.
But that's what I'm.
Here's trying to wrap it up. You could start at half of it.
Yeah.
You could start at 25 and with the goal of getting to 50 by year 3. Because that's really when the full bond payments.
Yeah, and then you can base it on 100% whatever the bond is, or not, like, that seems reasonable to me as well.
What I'm trying to figure out is cash, right? So whether I pay $200 more a year in my water bill, or I pay $200 more a year in my property tax bill, it's still $200 out of my pocket.
It's calculated
Like,
different.
do I care? I don't like.
Well, I pay $100 a quarter for water. I have 2 meters. So now I'm gonna be paying 200.
Right, but I'm just saying, the extra 100 here
100%.
versus an extra 100 in taxes. The difference, I guess, is here, the money has to go towards water stuff,
Right.
right? Whereas taxes, it could go to all kinds of stuff, right?
I certainly would start low. Yeah, I think this is a major change. I have no problem with the concept of it, that we have a fee. Just think the fee, I think John's comment a moment ago is very powerful. I'm a $70 a quarter guy.
I'm a $40 a quarter.
Okay, so, but that, I just think that is just think it's very rapid, very big. Right, that can be ramped up over time, I understand. But I would start this concept without it being quite so dramatic.
Dan, did you have something?
Yeah, as other people have commented, ratcheting up based on the size of your water meter is kind of crude. Particularly for people who have 2 water meters, or, for people who don't know what the size of the meter. Whereas if you put it on the property tax, we have a board of assessors who figure out what the relative bills are going to be for people. And this, if we followed our formal procedure and paid for capital improvement, the bonds on capital improvements of the water system, then it goes on the tax rate, and you don't have these silly jumps that show up in this plan.
So you don't favor the concept at all?
I would be perfectly willing to use this concept to pay for the water meters specifically.
I see.
The water meters are in fact something that only people who have water use, and the cost of the water meters goes up with the size of the meter. So I would be perfectly willing to put this in. I'm sorry, I'm talking as if I'm the town. And this is my feeling. That we instituted to pay for the water meters. And then look at it again and decide whether we want to put a huge burden of the PFAS treatment on water bills or on tax bills.
But that's a later decision.
That would be a later decision.
I can imagine that if, you know, over the course of the year, you're paying, have to pay some amount of money as a homeowner toward the cost of PFAS project. $500 as additional, you know, cost of my water bills might be more objectionable than $500 property taxes, just they're kind of accustomed to that.
And the property taxes is very,
It's specific.
Particularly if federal government changes its tax policy.
Yeah.
Lets us deduct all of our.
at least the salt comes around.
Up to 10,000.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Chuck, you know, from being responsible for DPW, you know, ultimately, you don't care which pocket the money or, you know, how it gets paid for necessarily, but conceptually, is there any issue that you have with seeing it funded one way or the other? Just curious.
No, I really don't. I think the bottom line is I'm hopeful that as we find out what the design costs are and the subsequent construction costs, that the lag between town meeting and needing the money and wanting, like, I see that as the potential issue that I will have in terms of hitting the points that I was skeptical. And that's not to say it can't be done at town meeting. I think it can. That's more worrisome for me if there's a potential issue. Whereas if we had the money in hand in the capital fund or coming every quarter as part of the enterprise fund, then that seems like an easier path forward for me.
But you can't spend it unless town meeting appropriates it, so it's not like you can just use it.
I totally agree, but I do see it as if it comes on the tax rate as a vote and subsequent bond vote, and there's a issue with that because we're paying for it through the general fund, that's different. And if we say that the vote is coming out of the revenue or the bill will be paid out of the enterprise.
I don't think it makes any difference to people. The town meeting, they're looking at the total cost they're appropriating. They're not looking at which bucket it's coming out of. They don't have a clue. I'm sorry. We get confused. The way it's too many numbers, and I don't think people think about, oh, do I care whether this comes out of the enterprise fund or the tax rate?
I don't necessarily think that they care, but I do think if you're able to say at town meeting and subsequent bond vote that this money that, you know, this 27 million potentially that we're paying is coming out of the rates already, you will not see an increase on your tax bill quarter number one in FY27. That's a powerful statement. Or it's only 50% on your tax bill and 50% on the enterprise. I think that is a valuable thing to be able to say. If we're not able to say it, I'm not able to say it. I understand. I do think that at the end of the day, it will be voted on and approved. So to Andy's question, it doesn't bother me or, you know, sort of my preference, but I do think that's a legitimate thing, especially if it's up on the same warrant as a elementary school or potential DPW facility.
That's what it's like to get
One difference.
dicey when you have those competing, going up against each other.
One difference between funding at the enterprise and the general fund is the general fund not restricted to a 2.5% increase, whereas the enterprise isn't, or is it all together?
The water and sewer fees, any account fee is not subject to the
Right.
proposition.
Well, there's what they.
That's correct.
Sorry, that, so,
So traditionally, we have always approved bonds outside of. the
right,
comp.
yeah, we need to override if we
They've
get-
always been debt exclusion votes.
Yeah, it should be voted on that in that way.
But that's a big difference.
So moving on, how about here, much work, advise me again.
Yes, I think we need to come to a consensus, if we can,
Okay,
of what direction
okay,
we would prefer as a board.
thank you.
So one thought on this, I think Ann's comment is an interesting one, which sort of sets one side of the stage here, which is put it on the tax rate. And then the other side of the stage is cover it through water costs, meter costs, all of that. And it seems a little bit like we're kind of on this continuum we hear in politics world about flat tax rate versus progressive tax rate. It seems like a blend of both would be a good way to do this, and to say, okay, how much of this could be put onto the water? And the logic there is that everybody needs water. You know, that's across the board. And then take some portion of that and put it onto the tax rate. So you do basically both here. Because it just seems a little illogical to say, okay, people who are the snowbirds who aren't here or whatever are gonna pay most of this or a large percentage of this, but we all use water every single day. And that seems logical to me.
So you have a specific suggestion?
So specific suggestion would be, let's say we looked at the 27 million and we said, okay, maybe over the life of this project, we look at roughly a third of it. Or 25% coming off water meter and water usage cost, and the balance coming off the tax rate. Or if somebody argues with it, they could flip those numbers around.
Are you talking tax, water and sewer volume rates, or you talking volume rates versus a flat fee? So I think that's what we're trying to get to,
Okay.
is,
Right.
do we support a flat fee on the water and sewer? Or should it continue just with the tiered rates that they have? And
So hearing what Chuck's saying about quarterly fees for meters. It sounds to me like Manchester's low and we should have a higher quarterly fee. And yes, people aren't gonna like that, to John's comment, but we're also talking about investing in a whopping infrastructure thing here, and the money's gonna come from somewhere. So add that to the meters, up the water rates, and then on the differential, we vote from the tax rate.
I mean, I agree with conceptually what you said, but we just made a move in that direction by increasing the volumetric rates, right? Like that just happened, right?
But it's
So
happening
for
3 times.
operation-
I mean, when my water meter breaks, I have to buy a new one. I had to do it twice because the new one has plastic parts, and so if it freezes, blows out the plastic parts, and you have to buy another meter. That's
Are you
outside of
saying
any
that
other
should be
bill.
on cost, or are you saying that should be per cost? I mean, a bird flies into your window.
No, I'm saying that today, everyone who needs a water meter pays for it, outside of any rates. You just build it.
Well, not in this program, and not, like, there are instances where
There's a
the
whole
meter
set of
fails and
changes.
it is the town's fault, the faulty some part of it. No, freezing is, I would say, more of the homeowner's. If there's a malfunction of the meter, we would place it.
You didn't for me, I think.
Well, it's not like it froze.
Well,
Well, freezing's not the same. But, so, I don't wanna get into, each individual kind of, I thank Lord for it. I think, I like that idea. I would say, I'm not married to these numbers. I would, and I think I kind of did what you're saying. I just went maybe a little too far. So the 12.5 in my mind was, more or less when you factor in the money we got from the federal and, potential settlement money, that's roughly half. So that's where I started. You could dial this back. You could make it a flat fee instead of progressive. You could do all that and you could come to some point. What I was worried about in past discussions with the select board is what I do not want is to institute a $10 fee now. And then 3 years from now, because the PFAS comes in and the settlements are what they are, and then we're, you know, quadrupling that overnight or something like that to do the same thing. If you're saying that we'll just take that future problem and solve it with the tax rate, I think that is fine, and it's up to you guys, I don't particularly care, I just was worried about chasing this number and knee jerk, you know, so people can't count on a $50 bill or $10 bill or $100 bill. It's, you know, this year my water bill was 1,000, next year we're not paying for meters anymore, so it's 200, then the year after that we're paying for PFAS and it's 1,500, like that doesn't make any sense to me, and I think that would cause a lot of problems. And so what I would like is to, similar to what Mike said earlier, nice gradual, wherever we want to end up is where we'll end up. It can always change, like this is not voting on the next 5 years right now, or when the select board votes on it, it's voting on this year and a path forward. And we will evaluate that next year when we set the water and sewer rates. If we have a overage in the retained earnings from the volumetric rate, we will not raise rates next year. But if we are still projecting shortfalls based on that 4 quarters of revenue, it's only right to raise that volumetric rate. And that's what we do every year. So I'm not trying to change what we do every year, but there are significant issues that we need to address. And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we address them.
So I like Marty's proposal, I'd make it 50-50. I would start this system of having this, I would start with a lower number than $50, might be 10 or 20. Something in that range. Note to people that as we get more clear on the costs, that this will change. But I would do a lower number and I would shoot 50-50 as cost sharing between the rates, like the tax rate and the water rates.
So, you know, if we totally reasonable,
I'd use this to build up funds as we go towards the costs.
well, so that's another, it's over, I don't want to give you guys the impression that we're building up funds.
Well, I
We-
don't,
we are-
I don't mean it.
I don't want to say that out loud for the general
I'm
public.
not asking you to get caught in a corner.
Yeah.
I want to just come up with a general proposal. I think the concept of balancing is a good one. I'm just suggesting that it be 50-50 as opposed to 1/3, 2/3 or something else. That's my personal view. And that we start this as a concept, but we do it with lower amounts, so we don't end up with water bills going from $75 a quarter to 25 or whatever it's be. We would build over time to try to get that change that you're bringing about, which is a change. But I don't think it's dramatic. I think it's understood because water is critical to all of us and the cost for getting good water is changing.
Yeah, so I'm totally flexible.
So this is for FY 26.
25. Well, it would
We
be
already raised it for 25.
No,
right?
no, no,
Just the
the
volumetric.
selectmen can, the select
Do it at
board
any
can
time?
do it at any time. We don't control when they do it.
Well, I would favor putting this off because we just had a override. We've had 3 rate increases. What?
You haven't had an override.
We had one this year.
No, that's a debt exclusion.
Yeah.
Okay, debt exclusion override.
Anyway, and we've raised rates 3 times in the past 3 years.
but-
I would favor,
Dean, that debt exclusion override. We don't necessarily have to pay that in our tax rate, and so part of the theory is if you're collecting from this account, then less of that's coming out of the tax rate. So even though we passed it as a debt exclusion, we don't have to have 100% of that debt exclusion paid from the tax rate.
no, but it
Depends what
has
the money
increased our tax rate this year. We were
No,
over 2.5%.
Not yet.
Not yet. We won't
We
get
haven't
into
paid
it.
for it.
When the bond
You've
was,
authorized it, you haven't paid for it. You won't see-
Right.
You won't see it in your tax bill this year.
well, when the bond was issued, that's when,
When we execute the bonds.
right, that's when it,
And they determine how much bond they need based on how much money they're gonna take out of the enterprise fund to cover part of it.
but that's when
Yes.
it will cause the average annual person's tax rate to go over the 2.5% at that point.
At that time.
Yes. So I'm saying high level conception what Dean's saying is correct, even though yes, it doesn't kick in, but it's gonna kick in when we issue the bonds, so.
So where's the finance committee coming out? Do we have a consensus or do we not have a consensus?
I'm kind of, I'm in the boat as I think about this more on a. It's comment. It's making me think that, I think there's gonna be a bit of a reaction toward any sort of flat fee that isn't, you know, clearly and well explained and understood by folks. And I think the idea of, you know, I can get my mind around pretty easily the idea of funding my water meter upgrade. This kind of this finite cost, that kind of. I could get behind the idea that we need some sort of a flat fee to supplement the water rate to give us a little bit of flexibility for the puts and takes for what's actually consumed versus what the costs are for funding the water. But in terms of funding the PFAS project, I think that should just be a tax rate, just like any other debt exclusion project.
Yeah, I'm either A, 100% opposed to any of this, or B, I'm okay with like a little de minimis, like you wanna do $10 to everybody, just flat, I'm okay, like, sure, but. I'm definitely against the gradated, and I'm against some big dollar thing, like $50 on a $70 water bill, but I think that's crazy. Let it go to taxes.
The gradation, especially given the quantities of those larger meters that we know exist out there, it's not gonna make much of a dent.
So that's your input.
I would like, gee, thanks. I would like to suggest that we start with a fee that will pay for the water meters over 2 years. And that would be graduated based on the cost of the water, of the size of water meters. And that will give us a feeling for what the reaction of the town is going to be to adding a capital fee to water bills. And I think that's worth experimenting with before we launch into trying to pay for a third of PFAS, which we don't know within a factor of 2 what that cost is.
If the meters have a 20-year life, should we break that fee over 20 years?
Well, because the town has to pay for them upfront. And we don't want to be, in effect, loaning cash to people. Interest-free for stupid water.
But at some point, to avoid this in the future, if meters last 20 years and we have 2,000 people, we should be replacing 100 meters a year, or something like that.
If I may respond directly to that.
Yeah.
We have this poor history with that.
The meters change in capabilities, and it's a really good idea to move the whole town into
I get that,
a, yeah,
but I don't think they changed it.
they do. I mean, these meters, these current meters, we drive around and read meter by meter.
Yeah.
These report in, I don't know whether it's hourly or to a computer system at the DPW, which tracks usage, will detect leaks.
Will you be able to opt out of that?
No,
Because they're.
I'm sorry.
We're
This
getting off.
conversation is going off the board. The expenditure was approved by town meeting.
I get it.
We're not here to question it. We're not here to discuss
We're
it.
discussing how to pay for it.
We're discussing whether we want a flat fee added to the water and sewer bills, and that's all we're discussing. Instead of taxes.
The idea of paying for the meters over 2 years. Based
With a
roughly
flat
on the
fee.
size of pipe, flat fee makes a whole lot of sense. Because water meters are probably like the way cell phones have gone. In Dean's point, 10 years, we're probably gonna be replacing water meters. We won't deal with that. Somebody else will do it. And then we take temperature of what people think about the higher bills. And, whether it's done on the tax rate or through a blend of fees on water. We got a $27 million, some variant of that, not to deal with over the next bunch of years. Need to fund it.
Yeah, just a comment. It's an easier sales story. And I heard that from several people up there, say it's meters, and that's where we're gonna leave it for now. And in 2 or 3 years, if things evolve and you wanna introduce PFAS, you can do that at that time, but really right now, I think it should just be meters. And I think probably ought to start at a lower number, just because I've spoken with a number of people about $50 on top of typical usage, and that's a number that people see. React.
So Ryland, that is 2 years based on a $10 fee or 2-year payback? How much?
There's lots of variations on this because is it the meter, is it the endpoint, is it some portion of the fixed net system? So these are all costs that are, that we have a budget, but they're yet to be determined until we solicit the RFP response. So if it's, if we're allowed to ballpark it, then, I would actually probably it's closer to 50. That would be over 8 quarters, that would be
Well,
$400. That's
how much
probably the meter at the endpoint, not the installation. So that's, we're looking at a $1.4 to $1.5 million project. So if you divide that over, again, if it's the people with 2 meters, it's roughly 2,600 meters. If it's just the accounts, that's 2,000 roughly. So there's lots of different numbers that you can pull to make the end number come out what you want. I think we're probably not going to dial it into the nickel. It's more, if you're comfortable with $10 a quarter for the next 8 quarters, that's something. If you're comfortable with 20, that's probably closer. All the way up to 50, which I'm hearing is too high, so let's not start there. Let's start somewhere else.
it seems to me today you're charging people for meters. So it seems to me if the new meters are good, people are gonna pay for them, then quarterly charge should reflect what the cost of meters are. It's 2 years. Funded over 2 years, I mean, that seems reasonable, I would think we won't have it done.
You said $400 is the cost of meter, just high level ballpark, right?
What he's saying,
Plus installation.
he's saying 800.
Plus installation. It's gonna be a number.
So 400 over 2 years, to your point, is 50 a quarter, right?
Yes.
It's too high.
Yeah.
Like,
That's fine. It's not like 50, 20 years.
It's better than 400, right?
Yeah.
So
Or you do it over 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason.
You do it over 3, you do it over 4, you'll be cutting 25.
How, have you pulled together the parameters of the RFP?
What now?
Have you pulled together the parameters of the RFP?
I mean, I have done these in the past, so I know generally.
Does it have a timeline involved as to the period over which they have to?
Well, yeah, so there's gonna be a two-part RFP, so it's one to procure all the materials, the meters and the
Yeah.
elements. Then a separate installation contract, which would be a different vendor.
And over what period of time?
So it would have been 1 year, but I can easily make that 2 or 3. Inevitably, there's gonna be ones that are harder to get into, or there'll be some punch lists that, even if I set it at 1 year, it will take a little bit longer than 1 year, but. The general time, there's no reason we can't do 2,000 houses in a year, but there's no reason we can't do 1,000 a year for 2 years.
Oh.
I mean, year.
That can go through, right? Don't stretch it out.
Yeah, well, the issue with stretching it out is that we have half the old system and half the new system.
Right.
That's an issue. So the whole idea is we're trying to get to a new system that benefits the users as well as the.
Yeah.
So,
how does it benefit you? Just they're more accurate than us?
You get to see it.
no, it gives people the ability to understand their own usage. So that was one of the issues with the volumetric rates and going too high on the volumetric rates, and people don't know what their bill is until 3 months later. And what their usage is, even though, it's not an unknown thing, but it's not. Generally,
So that's the primary benefit of the new ones is the user gets to see how much they're using on an ongoing basis.
It's like my solar system, every day I can look at my app and see how much electricity I'm using, and if it spikes up sometime, you kind of see what in the heck we do.
Yeah, there will be leak alerts and stuff like that. Somebody mentioned leak detection, that's part of it. There's also leak detection benefits to the utility, so you can cover the system potentially. That's not, not everybody's doing it exactly the same way, but there are some bells and whistles.
But does the software or, as the host, is it a lot of you sort of does it flag a user with some spikes? And,
Yeah. So we will get that alert as well as the customer. If they opt in.
So there's a less payment,
Absolutely. Yes, I think that would be our role as utilities to not offer any payments to say, we try, you know, first day. So
Quicker repair, less waste.
Sorry, sir, but I have to ask, it's financial.
Okay,
Will we need extra internet security or anything? With all these accounts being online? I mean, water utilities are the #1 target of identity theft over, you know. And I'd hate to see someone lose their fortune because of a $500. So is there some kind of way to mitigate that exposure?
Well, so, you know, these things are, to some degree, they're gonna be hosted by a third party, like it's all cloud-based. So I think,
And they,
you know, most of them are like, they're not their own cloud, they're some web services or something. So that's something that we're paying for, and, you know, I can make part of the RFP process, you know, information on that security. It's, you know, again, you, as a user, don't have to opt into the internet on your end. If you don't wanna be connected,
there's not,
well,
okay, great,
but that's not opting out of the meter, that's opting out of, you don't need to make your own username and account.
right.
But, you know, we will have access to, or, you know, we will be given the data to alert you that there's a leak, and if we can't push that information to you and you can't fix it, you can't really justify the payment. If you're not worried about the payment, then, yeah.
I think the leaking is more on this. The unmetered use than the unmetered use is from the sewage treatment plant, which we're gonna mitigate hopefully this year, the water, the hydrant flushing. And I know I'm gonna digress.
Well, that's not
Okay.
revenue water, but that's not the same thing that, well, I'm talking about, the leak detection that we're talking about is for the customer after the meter.
Right, no, I get it, I just don't think there's.
I mean, we're doing a 20 system pilot, it's 3 leaks.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are significant leaks.
Oh, on
Okay.
leaks.
I think.
Check the water main over the culvert at Summer Street, over Causeway Park, I think it's like in. Yeah, by Sweeney Park. Yeah,
Okay.
like it was a-
So do we have a consensus of the board that we would support some type of a flat fee to pay for the meters over 2-year period, over a period of time?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
in Peter, Mike,
Just so that it's capping this amount at the cost of the meter, and then just dividing it over 24 months, 36 months, 48, like I don't care.
Yep.
Okay, then, yeah.
Steve,
We gotta pay for some. Yes.
Sarah says yes, so that's our consensus.
I just think it's important to cap the amount.
There are any numbers in there.
There's no number.
Well, it's taking the cost of the meter, and then it's just a question of dividing by how many months.
Concept, we've got a concept guidance.
We find this around enough for you?
I appreciate the time that you put into considering all of these alternatives. It's a complicated, and it's parts of it are a big change for the town. I really appreciate the thoroughness of it.
Next item on the agenda is harbor master reclassification. So there's some talk about changing the classification of the harbor master's job to make it eligible to retire earlier. And I think that in order for us to give any input, because my understanding, the select board wanted input from us, and not for us to give any input, we would need certain pieces of information. And the question is, what type of information would we want?
Say classified, that's right. What are the benefits that come with that classification? If we classify it, there are different choices there. What's the contrast of benefits? Does that change as a result of him coming an enforcement officer, I don't think there's some enforcement piece here. How did that affect the cost of the town overall? I think it's contrasting today versus what's being proposed. And seeing what that implication is, why we're doing it.
I think the other issue is how does it impact the calculations performed by the state retirement system?
Yes.
What's the motivation just to allow?
55 instead of 65. You're not telling them. Maybe 20 years of service and 50 or 55, something. It's the harbor master is not in the same classification as public safety officer.
There we go.
The request had been made to change it to be in the same classification as public safety.
So as the job changed in such a fashion, that leads to that logic. But that's part of the information, is there some change?
We may very well not have a choice because the state may require harbor masters to be trained as officers,
Right.
to go to the academy, and therefore automatically be in group 4 rather than group 2.
So why are we discussing this? I mean, if it's being required, I guess that's.
I think that's what's going, but that's conjecture, a little bit of my part, but that's reading the teams.
But at that point, if that happens, then it's part of the police department.
Correct.
Like, yeah, it's not even acceptable part.
They're converging.
No, I'm just saying, if what you projected could happen, if that does, at that point, it's just.
So we don't need to.
It's just the police department that's.
That's right.
Right.
We have time, there's no.
Okay. Yeah, we're not gonna do anything else.
So I have one comment, one thought.
Yes.
One is I would find out what our peer communities do on this. And if our peer communities are all lining up to oppose this or to support it, and it's federal or state, I think
It's state.
yeah, so I think it'd be good to see what our coastal peers are doing. And I would say, I think harbor master, who's not directly part of law enforcement, is a good thing. Having traveled around a lot of different communities there, particularly in Maine and places like that, there are a lot of harbor masters who are not part of the law enforcement. And I think it's better to find a person who's focused on the water and focused on relationships on the water, rather than having somebody who comes out of law enforcement shuffled into a maritime station.
And having the police do the enforcement of the law.
I would agree only if there is in conjunction with that non-law enforcement harbor master, a marine police unit that can be called upon if the harbor master gets into a jam, then they, right, like.
But I think if you look at what goes on out here,
My current model is that.
Right, like that, but before we had that, I'd argue it was a big risk because like,
Yes.
right, like. I love a harbor master and I'm a good guy, I'm about, but get the knucklehead coming in drunk from wherever and they're not gonna listen to mine, and now that's why Brian doesn't have handcuffs gun, whatever,
Right.
And before we had the trucks on the boat, like, the logistics of trying to, right, come on, like, that's just, it's not really, they're on the coast guard now.
it's like, look at what the job entails, it seems like 80% of it, 85% of this relationship building, and 15% of it is dealing with that. Where you need to up the level of force and you've got plenty of force on land that can be applied to that.
But that 15% can cause a lot of damage, right? I'm sure I've seen it out there.
You don't have to go very far to find it, the harbor master part of the police department. It's what.
Like, I remember getting in this debate a while back with another one with FinCom, like, everybody loves Byron, I'm like, I'm not talking about the people who live in Manchester, we all know Byron, like, I listen about, I'm talking about a person from not Manchester that doesn't give a blank, and they're not gonna listen. Like,
Well, this might actually, save money because we won't need to have the resource officer. Down the road.
Yeah, we're not gonna talk about this, it's getting late, we still have other. Okay, so we're different, somebody can come back to us in 3 years and we're not here. The next item on the agenda is to discuss the fiscal year 24 budget review process and changes for the fiscal year 25 budget review process. And Greg has given us some ideas.
Together, that shows it's been no time on the upfront. The reason you're raising this is
Yeah, the bottom line,
long term.
I think more time needs to be spent. Those long-term issues.
I think we could start the process by starting with the 10-year capital plans. And then, once that's developed, get into what the actual projects are for the current capital projects are. But I am not in support of putting more responsibility on the liaisons. I think that we can't have one person on the finance committee coming to the budget and I think it needs to be.
I was gonna say the same thing a different way. If you were gonna go down that road, of putting more responsibility on the liaisons, then we gotta take more seriously the allocations and stuff. Not just like we're taking 5 seconds, oh, we got these, you got 5.
Right.
It would have to be much more rigorous discussion about it.
Agree with that.
I feel like our model of having big departments of school, but police, fire, and DPW come in talk with us is really good because the liaison, we can all go and listen and formulate our ideas, but it's this group sitting around here all interacting together. I think best results come out of that.
With different viewpoints.
And I strongly support Sarah, at least a 5-year capital plan, 10-year. I mean,
I think we need a 10-year, I think 5 years is
you
too
sort of
short.
say, let's look at the multi-year, and it's like one meeting, and then. And frankly, that's fine when we were doing CapEx and doing about 3 million a year for years and years. Now these numbers are getting big, looking 10, 12, 15 years out, the numbers are really big. We just need to be looking forward and planning. In my opinion.
With more details.
Yeah.
You know, instead of having X million a year for water infrastructure, have an actual plan, what you're gonna do where, you know, what areas you're gonna do, so it's a little more specific, so you kind of see, okay, this is everything that needs to be done, and this is kind of the plan, laying it into the capital plan of when it might be spent.
Outside of just a spreadsheet or what's another
Yeah,
for the caption.
yeah, just, I mean, have everything in this large capital plan. You know, because there's gonna have to be some shift.
Chuck's point, things take planning, you know.
Right.
Anticipating planning, spending 20 million on this, you're gonna take the year of engineering in advance, right?
Right.
It takes time in advance and permitting, and all these things queue up, so.
So how would the capital items be broken down? I mean, would there be separate stages for each project that's over a certain amount of money or something?
So you would identify your large facility needs.
Yeah,
That's really good.
but then you would have
Requires-
to break each one down into the components.
Right.
Based on, yeah. The design, and,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
So there was an agreement that we need to spend more time on that. So how do we free up that time if we're meeting more often? I'm just trying to get a sense of how we're going to accomplish it. If you want to keep the department reviews very similar to what you've been doing, but you're adding the element of the more detailed filling on capital. It's more meeting time.
So oftentimes we touch base in October, we touch base in November. And it's more like, it's like, what do we want to do in the year ahead? And then you sort of get the budget, everybody pulled together around holiday time. So what if we looked at a multi-year capital plan in October and November? So we were starting to queue up on that before the budget process,
Right, so
rather than tacking it on to the end. And then I think it may want to be an agenda item periodically, like a quick touch as we go through the budget year. So Chuck's talking about DPW. It's like, okay, this is what we're looking at for capital in coming fiscal year. And oh, by the way, let's take a couple of minutes to think about what the implications are for the next 5 years for this. You still might use silos for various 5-year projects. Or you might say, I'm having a really hard time getting steel pipe, let's shift this out 2 years and shift this back.
That could all happen in the fall rather than the winter, and then in the winter, we could just spend the budget itself, the operating budget. And have capital all finished. I mean, I know that people want to push things closer to town meeting because it's closer to when the projects have to come in, but it just seems to me with capital, we didn't do a good job of nailing it down earlier this year. We started talking about it.
So title, we didn't actually make
But
decisions.
it was a very painful process because we circled back around on
Right.
the same thing.
We kept revisiting.
Right, and so I don't know if it's possible to get all of the capital completed before December. I don't know.
Well, if we're talking long range planning, like 10 years, then. You just have to dive in. I don't
Yeah,
know.
5 years or 10 years, we have to talk about it in October, November, or April.
No, but I'm saying you start with the 10-year plan. And you work down towards the current, and if you have a good plan, then you know what all your capital items are for your upcoming budget year. You don't have to wait till winter.
Well, I think it's gonna.
What you have done, yes.
Right.
But I think it's gonna be a struggle the first few years because you're dealing with those things that need to get done. Yeah. We had a 10-year plan 5 years ago, then we'd be pretty, we're talking about developing it.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is if you have a 10-year plan, then you're starting to schedule things out, and then when you get down to the current period, oh, I can't do a big thing now because I need to do all this other stuff currently, and therefore my big stuff has to move out a little bit, that type of thing.
The sort of run of the mill account, if I can say it
Right.
that way, the 3.5 million a year. That's not the issue.
Right.
The issue are the big, the DPW garage, the Essex Elementary School.
It's facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also apparatus.
Okay, it's apparatus, but
Well, the other big one is critical roads and sea level limits.
well, I think that's private facilities.
But I mean, for instance,
Facilities and infrastructure.
where are people cut off when the road floods? Like Beach Street, this January was a wake up call. The water basically came up through the drainage system to flood the road. It didn't come over from the park. It came up, so a berm isn't gonna help that. What we need to look at is slowly trying to get some, like, I don't know.
But it's pretty,
Ocean Street
the pretty new gates on all those drains.
with pumps or just.
No.
But Dean, I don't think it's our job to solve the problem.
Right, no,
It's
but
our
identify,
job to help prioritize
so like
But
Ocean
it's
Street,
certainly-
projects.
Raymond Ave,
A new cost area, which we have not been budgeting yet. On any projections are those
Climate,
resiliency needs.
Right.
And they're gonna loom large.
right, and that we need to get
That's
into
huge.
the 10-year plan, yeah. And I just think a 5-year plan's too short.
Okay.
I don't think you cover enough big stuff in a 5-year plan.
I guess my point is. Years 6 through 10, it's not so critical to have nailed down the 3.5 million,
Right, I'm
Right.
talking about the bigger stuff.
the bigger stuff.
Yes,
That's the
yes.
focus.
Yes.
That's what I'm.
but I think in due diligence to presenting it to town and the town meeting. It's a little disingenuous to say, we're trying to pass a capital plan this year, $7 million. But next year, we're gonna match you with 20 because we think we might have a school to build and a water treatment plant. I mean, we need to get in front of this and look at it from a 10-year plan. And because. Yeah, we just do. Do we have any idea when the Essex bond will hit 2027?
We'll deal with that when we talk about the capital plan.
Right. I mean, probably the beginning part to your question, Sarah, is what items are on that capital plan? And what level of probability, or are they A, B, C, or D priorities? And, you know, Essex Elementary is on there, DPW plant, fire station move, water treatment plant, there's a whole list of these things.
Yeah.
We went through this about
Library-
3 years ago.
library
and
addition?
the number was big,
Which would be off the
But where are
table because
those-
they can't get the land.
which are want-haves, which are must-haves, which are
Yeah.
kind of out of our control. And how do they fit on the timeframe?
Can't say yes to everything all the time.
Right.
That's why we have to come up with an interim, something to keep the water out of the police budget and the fire budget until we can come up with
So when are we gonna start it?
interim.
Do you have information saying in November
Well, we need to do it before that.
Yes.
or October?
I just need to target. Go first.
Earlier the better.
Did you work with department leaders on? Putting together proposals and making. Operating, but detail enough so that you got some, sure.
So-
Yeah, operating budget process. Funding fixed, we typically receive it here, January, maybe December. We talked about these pieces moving around. Is that such that it remains the same sort of moving the capital planning around the?
So we need to get started now with department leaders, the capital. Have that ready by 1st of October. And then they can focus on their operating budget for October, November for the December presentation.
So we separate the two things, and so when we meet
Okay.
with the departments in the winter, we're talking operating budget. We're not talking capital.
I don't know. I'm trying to fit the human beings here.
It's their time, you know. This would be a change, and
Yeah.
that's a bumps in the road, but I think that. Or to coalesce around the time frame here, that's
It's
it's doable. It'll be a little bit of pain, but it's doable.
That's what I'm afraid of. Well, that sounds like a plan.
And what we probably need to meet every other week or something. Twice a month.
You're thinking of the fall?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, seems reasonable. I mean, to Andy's point, we get a bit of steam on it this year. Next year will presumably be easier.
Right.
But we also have another week or two for town meeting, which pushes that schedule. I'm not advocating we use that, but if we go through the regular budget year on operating. There's probably one more meeting week to tie up capital before it goes to press. I prefer to do things earlier rather than later. But the saying there's a safety net at the end.
We'll take every moment we have.
If we're doing the capital in the fall. Then when we do the operating budgets in the winter, we should be able to go through them with. Only once each.
And that's so much more efficient than trying to do it. Yeah. And we're trying to remember what we said with DPW, and why is fire doing this? We talked about this, but now they're asking for that. It's like. We do capital up front and then revise it with each. Operating meeting we go through. By the time we get to the end of the operating budget. You know,
We have a meeting tomorrow at CPC and we're gonna discuss possible projects too.
Oh, good.
Anything else to say from the finance?
Well, and I think that, the thing that irritates me, one of the things. Is that CPC is coming up with this list of stuff that's never hit any of our capital plans. And I think that if it's gonna be important enough for CPC funding, it needs to have been on a list. Of town capital projects.
All that stuff is just kind of.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's true there.
I think we're peeling away the CPC. It's. That ought to be saved for real significant
Right.
projects.
Yeah.
It ought to be for the big land conservation, the big affordable housing project, or major historic renovation. It shouldn't be,
For Moby, that's.
Final.
it should be. Yeah,
So,
we're funding a lot of small.
Yeah.
Fucking rack,
Costing us maintenance.
yeah,
I mean, Parks and Rec is going to CPC for all their projects instead of coming through the town budget.
right,
I just don't think that's.
how do we,
the
I agree, so how do we make that happen?
Well, that's it tomorrow.
We,
We should be looking at some of the town lists
And some
if we see something we want to do that's not on there, we should try to put it on there first.
To me, CPC is legacy projects. That's what CPC should be.
Like,
Question,
like,
Kathy? Greg? Do you review what goes to the CPC on your department leaders before it gets to CPC?
Not all the time.
That is one suggested stopgap. If we think that things that are inappropriate are going to CPC, there's got to be some gatekeeper. Whatever that is.
I think this discussion should involve the CPC.
Yeah.
And, I just think it's time for a step back and reevaluate.
so there's like no rules that they have to spend all their money every year, right? Like,
but there's also the thing that we can't, I mean, we have to approve what they have, but we can't really tell them what to do, and Greg can't really tell them what to do.
But it seems like guidance from
Yeah.
Greg and the Board of Selectmen particularly on what we would like CPC to become in the future. It's important.
They can influence.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's important.
Right now, the return forecasting this year is 14.4. For surcharge for a 1.5.
State matches.
Yeah, state match.
I would just get rid of
Pitiful.
CPC myself,
there you go,
Pitiful.
there you go.
if it doesn't accomplish what we want, and the state reimbursement isn't enough to justify.
Yeah,
continuing.
14%.
And it's gonna keep going down because more towns are coming on.
They've got to correct that, or it's just gonna die without.
Yes.
They have a
At
pretty
50% plus, it was worth doing. But that below 20%, it's considerable away.
They do have a pretty impressive 5-year plan. So maybe that's a place to start looking at.
That the
Wow.
state has or?
No,
Our
town,
CPC.
it's on, yeah, it's on the CPC website. The people
Oh,
are doing it already.
I see.
They have their own 5-year. But which is an eye opener, I'm learning.
Point of order,
Okay.
it's 9:30.
Yes, okay.
Keep going.
So we'll have a meeting. To start capital, October 2nd,
So prior to that,
yeah,
I think it would also be beneficial to have you identify sort of key concerns or areas of interest of operations. Are there areas that you want a deeper dive? Be helpful for you to identify that by early September.
And that's operations, I think I heard.
Yeah. The select board gave a green light to doing some operational audits. In preparation for the new budget season. So, we work with the state or hire a consultant to help us do some reviews of processes and services that are being delivered. We're doing as efficiently as we can, which services that we don't need to be doing, etc.
That's already been action.
Yeah, they give a green light to that. We haven't implemented it yet.
Yeah, but
Get someone on board to do that.
going to happen.
Okay, so do you have any other financial updates for us, guys? Minutes, did anybody look at the minutes?
Can I ask one question?
Sound good?
Sorry, I was about to explain Mark getting onto the housing register, has there been any progress on that?
That it's revisiting.
Okay.
Okay, so
Is it on our end or outside of our end?
it's been both. It's been both.
I think that there are some members of the Affordable Housing Trust that are trying to figure out exactly what's going on.
There's change in staff at the CC. So it's been.
Yeah.
Just sort of a long list of barriers to prevent from happening.
Okay,
Minutes so far.
minutes. Anybody else look at minutes?
I put that.
Okay, we should get to them.
Three, they were months ago. Yes, they were March.
Okay, do you want to make a motion to approve?
Yeah.
Can we set some minutes?
I think that we agreed.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
I'll abstain.
I'll abstain.
All in favor. Okay, next meeting.
So October 2nd.
Well, no, we gotta meet before then if we're gonna give them input on the operations area. Can we meet in August? Or he doesn't like to meet in August, but
I can be
but
August.
you've got planning board issues this summer, you're kind of restrained in what you can do.
Not me.
Breathe the water.
Well, it's now the 5th through the 9th.
Okay,
The
whoops,
14th is no good. 21st, maybe?
21st is no good,
Okay.
that's ZBA.
Are we going for Wednesdays?
I think is that true, is that the consensus of the best day for people?
Which,
Well, sorry, yeah, Wednesdays.
the 28th.
August 28th?
Yeah.
Oh,
I can't do August.
maybe not. When do you need your stuff, Greg?
So if you did it the first week of September, fourth,
Okay,
that would work.
September 4th?
Yep. Fine.
Okay. And so people before September 4th, people need to think about the operating budgets and
And as we think
What type
about
of
it,
addition?
we should be thinking about it, what kind of efficiencies, staff reassignment, can you give me
Information we
some
want,
framework
right?
you're thinking?
So are there areas of concern in terms of operations? Are there areas where you think it could be more efficient? Are there areas where you think we're services that we no longer need to provide? Is there a service that we should be providing that we're not?
My general feeling for a town this size, it would be nice if we could have more people doing multitask and.
we're not gonna discuss that tonight.
Right.
We're gonna discuss that on September 4th.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
There was something, and I don't, Mike, I think you asked about it. There's something that we were hoping Andrea could put into the next budget book. And I'm struggling to remember what it was. It was like revenue from the prior year or something, because we kept banging up against that question a lot. But can't remember what
well,
it
Andrea,
was.
do you remember?
Yeah, I have a note for the next budget book to put in like a higher level budget summary. So like
Oh,
having like
yeah.
the revenues and at top and then like the expenses in the bottom, like really high level
Yeah,
budget
I
summary
don't-
from year to year.
If Maureen mentioned me, that, I mean, this is my thing that of course I'm always looking for, which is analyzing total revenue versus. Total revenue actual to budget and then total expenses actual. to
And
budget.
we're receiving that in every quarterly report, and we received it this week for the full,
Yep.
fiscal year 24.
Right, but I like to see it, and Andrew's created a great Excel file for me where it does it on an annual basis, and then you can track year by year, right?
Right.
Andrew, yeah, you put that together, it's awesome, I love it, I just wanna keep seeing it getting updated, I don't know if that's the thing.
No, but I think Andrea hit the nail on the head. It was the revenue, the total revenue for a particular department while we were looking at it, because we were like shoveling backwards and forwards through the book and trying to remember what came from where, and what went from where. So that would be very helpful.
But Andrew, so since I got me going on that one, when do you think that one could be updated? Maybe in a couple weeks, a month?
I think I need to understand what spreadsheet this is we are talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's just
I think
total-
we need to be careful about the amount of extra work we're asking Andrew to do. So we need to make sure that everyone on the finance committee feels the need for various reports.
Well, I can explain it to you if you give me a chance. It's just total revenue for a fiscal year compared to the total forecast for that year, and the total expenses for a fiscal year compared to the total forecast for that year. And she's got it already in place. So it's not adding additional work, it's just updating something. Because it shows how big that gap is. It shows that we're like pulling in an extra $1 million a year just due to forecast, and that's a big deal. Like we're sandbagging forecasts, so it's a big deal. If Andrew wants to tell me that that's a huge lift, that's fine too, but I haven't heard that.
I was gonna say thank you, Sarah, but I do have that spreadsheet and it's a couple of lines and I can send that out before your next meeting on September 4th.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? I was remiss that I didn't get on the agenda, so we can't do it, is voting for chair and vice chair, so we'll have to do that September 4th. So that's afternoon. Speak that. Okay, sorry about that. Good job, you are moving. More seconds, all in favor?
I mean.
Thanks, Andrea.
Ooh. I'll bring these things in
Thank you.
tomorrow, okay? I haven't signed them all. And I don't sign after 9:30. Oh, no,
Now,
That's fine.
is this South Sig line or what it is? Ask.
If you wanna
Email you.
hold on to
Any
them,
comments?
What?
if you wanna take them or you'll sign them here.
I'll take them with me and sign them back tomorrow. It'll take me 15 minutes to do it because I have to put in the number approved on each one, the date of the meeting, the amount.
If you just wanna sign, I can put it on, and all the votes were 6-0.
I used to just sign them and Greg can build it any number he wanted, you know?
The number needs to match what's on the paper.